back to Spectrum TV. I'm Karen Tui, boys, your host, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you back to episode 2 with the amazing, the stunning, the incredible Greg Ward. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Karen. Thank you very much indeed for a wonderful introduction. You're going way too far, but I'll take it in these COVID times.
Absolutely. So just before I tell you all about Greg, I want to let you know that season 2, this is our second episode, and we're all about relationships and resilience and being the best that we can be. And that's what this series is about. And so that's why we have Greg here. And let me tell you a little bit about him. He is a professional speaker, a global professional speaker. He uses his voice and experience to affect change in his audiences, whether as an MC, presenter, digital host, performer, or keynote speaker. You might have seen him on the television, incognito, playing the piano. You just never know. I won't give any secrets away. But he is an extraordinary man with a huge heart. And I wanted to talk to him tonight about vulnerable leadership, because I know, Greg, that is a space that you have moved into. And so I'd love you to start by telling our audience about yourself and what got you into this vulnerable leadership.
Cool. Thank you very much indeed for that. Absolutely. So there's not much more to add, really, Karen, but I've been doing work in the event space for almost 25 years, trained as an actor, performer, musician, entertainer, and then found the world of associations and events. And I've worked with so many different sectors and had a great deal of pleasure working in the education sector on a number of events. One in particular where I had the great pleasure of moderating Sir Ken Robinson, who joined us in live from LA on a major in Palmerston North. It was phenomenal. And I was very saddened to hear the news about Sir Ken.
Lost to the education world and the visionaries who make a difference, yes.
Hugely. He made a great impact on me, and he certainly has made a great impact on many people all around the world. And I think that's really the biggest thing that we can do with our lives, really, is to have an impact on others, which relates directly to my experience and kind of my story as well. But before I do go into that, one of the things that I'll be talking about mental health, I'll talk about wellness, resilience, suicidal ideation, suicide, and so forth. And so what I always like to do at this point, just prior to getting into that, is to say, if you are feeling at risk of harm of yourself or anyone else, then 111 is the number to immediately call. If, however, you feel that you need to talk to somebody through this or after this, then 1737 is the number to text or to call. It's trained counsellors on the end of that line, and that is with the New Zealand Telehealth Service. So a phenomenal service that we have here in New Zealand as well.
So can I just interrupt you, Greg, because we have an international audience. So in Australia, the number is 000, and in America, of course, it's 911. So please, if you need help, go and find those numbers and please call them.
Thanks, Karen. So where I came into this game is that I think over my entire life, it's been kind of a series of very high highs and very low lows. And it's something I didn't really take too much into account until I did a conference in Melbourne in 2018. And I happened to be arrived on the Monday morning, the convener comes to see me and I could see it. He needed something. He wanted something doing. And he said, Greg, we're going to close the conference. We don't have a closing keynote speaker, and I was emceeing at this particular event. He said, I'm going to talk at the end of this conference around an element of my own mental health, around anxiety, and I've got a half-hour slot, but I'm only going to speak for about 15 minutes. Do you think you could speak for, say, 15 minutes on something along the same theme? And the 3 themes of the conference were performance, well-being, and diversity. And the well-being piece is what he wanted to talk about. But what he didn't know, and I didn't really want to reveal to him, and I didn't reveal to him at that point, was that I'd arrived in the previous night, I'd got horrendously drunk, and I'd attempted to take my life on the Sunday. And I'd woke up on Monday morning in crisis at a conference and just having to go on. And the world of the MC is all about you, constantly about you. It's not about me, it's about you. How can I help you? And so I was just in work mode, and I spent the next 2 days coming up with well, a story that I thought I can get away with, basically telling the audience about some kind of workplace bullying thing. But I got to the end of the conference and he stood on stage, delivered a beautiful story about pushing through a significant amount of anxiety after a near drowning and having to learn how to swim because he didn't know how to swim. He did it all in secret. It was an amazing story. And as he said these words on stage, I realized that I couldn't just come up with something, pat. And for the first time ever, I stood on a stage and I talked about what life was like for me and the game of being a professional speaker, going from place to place, particularly the MC role, where you are part of the group, but you're not. You're on the outside. And as much as they want you to come with you, you can't because you're not really there. And then, of course, you have these great highs because you do great shows, and then you go back to a cold hotel room, a very lonely existence. And I would use alcohol as a crutch. And so I revealed this on stage, and I didn't go into any details about what had happened for me, but I was telling them the reality of me. And it was at that point, I walked off stage at the end of the conference, and as I walked halfway across the room, someone touched me on the arm, and I turned around, and there's a young lady behind me, and she said, "Thank you for sharing that. I thought I was the only one." And that is the catalyst. That's the reason that I realized that it wasn't weak to talk about your feelings, talk about your emotions. It was an incredible strength. And it took me a period of about 6 to 8 months where I came to terms with really what was going on for me and put a whole lot of strategies in place. So that's really the position that I came to. And what I decided to do was to become, as much as I could, a beacon where if I can stand on a stage and I can talk about what's happening for me, then you can too. And it's a matter of guiding people through that and realizing that it is, and as I call it, it's your leadership superpower, vulnerability.
I so hear you. And that whole idea that when you share your story, your real story, how many people come and say, "Me too." And for me, when I did that in front of the Professional Speakers Association in Australia and shared my story, I was stunned at how many people afterwards came and said, "Me too, nearly there and petrified of getting there." And that you would have no idea, but it opened up the conversation. And so that being real and vulnerable is scary, but so needed. So when you talk about vulnerable leadership, is that what you're meaning? Just to be able to lead the way, to be able to do it first so that others can?
Yeah, completely. The challenges in this is as a title, right? It's hard to put this into words. Is it leadership vulnerability? Yes, it is. But it's about being vulnerable as a leader, and that's something that those people that you are leading need to know, need to see. They need to know that you're a human being, and that connection is an incredible part of cohesive teams. So one of the biggest tenets of a high performing team is undergoing shared adversity, and it's very difficult to have shared adversity if the leader isn't willing to share their elements of adversity. So I think that's a really important part of it, and there's a big challenge in that with a lot of people in terms of risk, personal risk, social risk, of being able to do that. But it's amazing what happens when you break down that barrier and allow people to see who you are.
Absolutely. And I think it's worth mentioning that leadership doesn't mean you have to be in a paid leadership position. It doesn't mean, for my education colleagues, it doesn't mean you have to be the principal or the lead teacher in a syndicate or anything. You can be your own leader. You're a leader in your family. You might be a leader at a sports team in your church. You might be even just self-leadership. So it's that holding on to not the title, but leadership without a title.
I completely agree with you on that. And that's really stepping into the power as a leader, seeing what's needed and being that person, being that empathetic voice to actually ask the question. Because we're all very, very good at picking up cues, but majority of us are also very, very good at going, "It's not my problem. It's not my role. That's not something I should be doing." And I challenge people to go past that, allow that moment to happen, but then move on with it.
Yeah, thank you. So as you think about whether yourself or others, and what other superpowers do you consider that leaders have in that leadership. So you've talked about vulnerability. What other superpowers do you think that happens there in that space?
I think for a leader, courage is a really important part. You sort of just touched on that. There's those elements of it's risky. It's risky to share of yourself, and so being able to display courage in that respect is really good. Being willing to fail. I come from an improv background. I still do. I spent many years training, and I spent the last 20 years teaching improvisation, particularly musical improvisation and song. Coming up with a song on the spot, which covers a couple of very scary things for most people, which is improvising for a start, but singing, getting people to actually sing. I'm always reminded of Sir Ken when I'm talking about that, because we have singing drilled out of us from the moment we open our mouths. There's constant critical voices all around us, particularly about our singing. So we get very self-conscious of that, and I try and open people up with that. So the elements of risk-taking, we know that being willing to fail has incredible power in fast learning. So I always say fail fast and fail big, and allow yourself the risks to make that happen. I jotted a few little pieces down around these as well. Listening. One of the biggest aspects for me as a leader is the ability to listen. And it's listening to actually hear the message, not listening to find a moment to be able to talk. Those critically different moments there.
Yeah. So what are some of those skills of a great listener then? So listening to understand. What else would you say?
Yeah, listening to hear, listening to get the full sense of the message. And listening's a key element. So when I was training as an actor, I trained with a technique called the Meisner technique. And this is created by a guy called Sanford Meisner, who ran the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York. And the whole aspect of Meisner is never do anything unless your partner makes you do it. And so it's a process of actually watching with every fiber of your being. So it's listening, watching, seeing, touching, feeling, sensing, so that you can understand and only react to whatever that person's giving you. Now, that on a stage environment, that's fantastic, right? Because it creates tension. It's beautiful. In real life, you want to be a little bit more reserved, because you don't want to react to every single, only do the things that your partner makes you do, scene partner kind of thing. But that's one of those elements is to use what I call whole body listening, to actually take a moment, which is pushing away the external input of whatever is not in the environment between you and the person you're listening to, and actually refocus. And we're very challenged in this space because we're so reactive. We have so many different inputs, right? I mean, even like in this room here, I've got around about 9 different screens that are completely all around me. And so, but my focus is here. And when I'm saying it's here, it's we have this mighty audience all around us. But I'm not focusing on an audience, I'm focusing on you. And when I say you, I mean the one person who's watching this. And the one person is everyone, but we're having a one-to-one relationship. Me just talking directly down the barrel of the camera. It's you and I here on screen. But I'm having this relationship with one person many, many, many times over. And so my focus here is very much there, in the same way as we would have this in a live conversation. It's that focus, being focused on the person.
And not distracted with what's happening on the other sides and with people moving, if there are. And also, we talk a lot in schools about whole body listening and helping children to be able to understand that. But it's also about being able to put your own thoughts aside for a moment, isn't it? About managing what we call impulsivity, so you don't blurt out something, and stopping that. Oh, you think your day was bad, you should hear about mine. And that one-upmanship when it becomes a competition, to really, truly be able to focus and listen. And I'm guessing this dovetails into, I know you talk about the power of now. And what is that?
The power of now, I mean, I came to realize this, over the course of this last couple of years, and in particular, around about the beginning of last year, I was thinking about what it is that I want to speak about. What do I speak about? And it was in process with Steve Lowell, actually, on stage, who's a Canadian-based speaking coach, phenomenal guy. And it was a realization that that it's all about the now. Everything I do is about this. So I started thinking more deeply about it, and I came up with a kind of a phrase, which is, the past is gone, we cannot change it. The future is uncertain, we can't rely on it. All we have is this present moment, this now. So live now. This is what we can affect. We can affect this moment and this moment. No, this moment. Each of those moments we can affect, but the past is already gone. We can change how we feel and think about the past, but we can't change the actual facts of the past. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So if we're concentrating on just here, then we have wonderful sense of peace and control. They often talk about, in broad strokes, that if you are in a depressive state, it's more about the past. If you're in an anxious state, it's more about the future. But the moment of peace is here, right in this nexus between the past that's just gone and that cusp of the moment.
I guess it's about presence, isn't it? I know that what I work on when I'm doing my daily yoga, it's about being totally present with what I'm not thinking about the next move, not thinking about the move that I couldn't do, not thinking about my emails, but just being totally present in that moment of the nowness. So, that's lovely. And I know you also talk about moments that matter. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, that came through the realization of the work that I was doing on myself as well. And it's the realization for me was that it wasn't the years of toil or the days, weeks and months of learning and the studying and the training that we do that really make an effect. It's the moments that we have in our lives that define who we are and how we act upon those moments. And there's a critical element within that as well, which is we have these moments, but we know a difference between an impulse, and talk about impulsivity, an impulse and a defining moment. So an impulse is, oh, there's some chocolate. I know I shouldn't have chocolate, but I'm going to have that chocolate. That's an impulse. But it's not a moment that matters. It's not a defining moment. But we will recognize these because we feel compelled to make a change. It's not a compelled to grab something or do something. It's compelled to make a change. The difference between that moment, allowing the moment to disappear or to acting upon it, is a decision. So we have to make a decision about that moment. We feel it, we experience it, then we make the decision. Are we going to do something about it? But unless you act on that decision, then you may as well not have ever made the decision in the first place, because the decision in itself is just a thought. The action propels you forward. And so these moments are critically important to you in terms of your life and the decisions that you make.
Yeah, I'm smiling and laughing because there was chocolate fudge in our house yesterday, and I don't eat chocolate fudge, right? I'm really controlled and self-disciplined and good, and I put it down in the downstairs fridge because I thought if it's down there, it'll be fine. And then late yesterday afternoon, I'm like, oh, one piece wouldn't hurt. So I walk all the way down the stairs, and I know as soon as I have one piece, I need another, and then another, and 4 pieces later, I'm like feeling like sick. And that moment that mattered was that moment that I knew that if I had that piece, and I didn't do it. So anyway, my Spectrum team very nicely ate it all today, so they have saved my waistline.
Well done. Well done.
I know that success books will talk about goal setting, and I know schools teach children about goal setting, but as a leader, you talk about setting clear intentions. And I think that's a wonderful distinction between goals and intentions. So as a leader, why are intentions needing to be clear?
Well, it comes down to how the mind works. So in terms of our brains, we've got this wonderful, vivid imagination, and we use intention setting specifically if we looked at people such as Olympic athletes, for example. So Olympic athletes go through various different methods of training, but one of the things they do is a lot of visualization. And within that, in terms of visualizing something, that's essentially setting a series of intentions about how you're going to approach a certain act or a subject or whatever the goal might be. There's a set of things that you need to do. But if you can practice that within your mind and you go over and over that, it becomes part of who you are. And when the need to act is upon you, then you will highly likely react in the way that you have already set the intention for. And I'll give you an example from my own personal life, is that I used to do a lot of travel on airplanes, not so much these days. However, one of the things that I do in an airplane is whenever the stewards or stewardesses are giving us information about the safety briefing, they'll say something like, do your seatbelt up, make sure you count the rows of seats to where your nearest exit is, and so forth. And you look around the plane and let's say 90% or more of people are reading, not taking a notice, not doing anything. So my whole process is at the start of a flight is to go, if I have to get out of this plane, how am I going to do it? And so I go through a process of looking at the seats. I imagine how the seat feels underneath my hand as I move my hands down the rows of seats. I take a moment to imagine what would the feeling be if the aircraft was upside down. Where would I be walking? What would my feet feel? Where's the intent? And so the constant for me is, my intention is to reach that exit. What do I need to do to get to that exit? And the same applies for whether it's in that environment or whether it's in a performance environment. I'm always looking to see, how many steps do I need to take to get to a stage? Where do I need to walk? If I'm introducing somebody, where will they come up on the stage? How am I going to shake their hand? What will that touch feel like? So each time you set the intention for an audience, it becomes seamless. And for you, it's just slipping into a pre-rehearsed piece, which may not have been pre-rehearsed, but the mind does not know the difference between reality and imagination, which is a really powerfully good thing for positive, but can also be a very powerful thing from a negative standpoint too. So you have to be a bit circumspect about how you use it.
And we've got to be careful about, what our thoughts are, right? And what we're thinking about all the time, because brain doesn't know the difference. So absolutely. Yeah. So
I did also say, Karen, sorry, on that one there as well, Peter Goldwitzer is the leading voice in terms of intention setting. So it's Gollwitzer, Peter Goldwitzer, and he basically came up with the psychology behind that.
Okay, thank you for that reference. That's great. Tell us about the resilience strategies then. I know there's a lot of people feeling a little bit stressed. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. So what strategies do you have to help people be resilient?
Really good point. At this time of the epoch that we are currently in, our resilience is a set of, what do you call it, a routine. So you can create for yourself a really resilient platform by following a set of routines. And so I've done this for myself. So I have 5 strategies that I use specifically for myself, and they are very valuable. And I often find myself, when I'm coming a bit unglued, if I think back, I'll notice that I've actually dropped 1 or 2 of those strategies, and a matter for me then to get back on that horse, and away we go. So I've just outlined some of these here on screen as well. So this is probably a little bit easy to do. So in terms of the resilience, for me, this is one of the biggies: moderate or avoid alcohol. As I've always said, though, alcohol is not a performance enhancer. So it was one of those things that I never used in my work. It was always something after. It was always something as a reward, and it's a particularly poor reward, I've got to say. So yeah, moderating or avoiding alcohol. Alcohol is a real challenging thing in terms of resilience, because another factor is, and I'll get to this shortly, is sleep. And alcohol and sleep not mixing at all. Second of these is engaging in an exercise routine, and there's a whole host of scientific evidence about the efficacy of exercise in terms of being an antidepressant. So it's as effective, or a regular routine of exercise is as effective as low-dose antidepressants. So this is a beautifully natural way from an endorphin standpoint, but it also does a number of things in terms of routine. So when you set a routine to go and do something, and you can set micro goals, I'm going to run another 100 meters in this particular day. I'm going to spend another 3 minutes on the bike. And each one of these is a goal. And because it's so small, it's an easily manageable goal. But each time you create a micro goal and then achieve it, then you are constantly building yourself upwards from a positivity standpoint. So I find it quite difficult to get out of bed. One of the challenges, and I don't think I'm alone here, but one of the things that I would normally do is I would do a series of tricks for myself, which is the alarm goes off and I don't want to get up, but I'll just say, just open your eyes. That's all you need to do. Just open your eyes. That's your goal. Just open the eyes. And so I'll do that. And then I'll say, well, seeing as your eyes are open, why don't you just slide your foot out of the bed? That's all you got to do. I'm not asking you to do anything more than that. Just slide your foot out of the bed. And as you can say, incrementally, eventually I'm standing, I'm dressed, and I'm out the door. And by the time I'm out the door, I might have achieved 20 goals. And that's an incredibly good start because you're already in a positive frame of mind. So again, exercise, wonderful thing. Yeah. Nutritional balance is a really important thing. So making sure, again, it's just moderation, right? It's just ensuring that everything in moderation, nothing too exaggerated. But in terms of support, multivitamins are a very good way of being able to maintain balance as well. I'm not a clinician, so I'm not here to prescribe anybody anything. So I suggest you talk to a health professional if you are intending heading onto a course of vitamin supplements. But we know that vitamin B6 has shown significant efficacy in terms of anti-anxiety, anti-stress, your omegas and fish oils and so forth as well. So do your research, consult your health professionals, and embark on keeping yourself nice and more sane with a little bit more of nutrition. Talked about sleep just before. Aiming for 8 hours sleep is a really critical thing. Multiple studies have been done, and it seems to be that most adults tend to get around about 5.5 hours, and it's not good. It's not enough. It doesn't work. So you want to be aiming for that 8 hours sleep. And going back to alcohol, 1 unit of alcohol will basically ruin half of your night's sleep. It will take away the efficacy of the sleep. What is a unit of alcohol? So 1 glass? 1 unit, 1 glass, essentially. I can't exactly remember the mils, whatever the mils is for a unit, but it's pretty small. it's not a giant drink at all. Probably about one small glass of wine is enough to actually to give you sleep deprivation.
I was listening to Dr. Greg, you're Greg Ward, Dr. Greg Wells, and he was talking about you've got to go through 5 sleep cycles of 1.5 hours. So he'd say 7.5 hours sleep. But the thing that was stunning, the first 3 hours is where your brain does all the learning. It's putting your information into making it make sense, it's filing it, it's relating it to things and creating memory. The last 2 cycles of sleep he talked about were for creativity. And so if you've got a problem, you can pose that before you go to bed, and then those last two cycles of sleep is where your brain is likely to come up with the answer. So I found that fascinating.
I love the brain. And the research that people do into it and find tricky ways of being able to get the answers out of the brain, because unfortunately it's not an organ that will tell you what's actually happening for it. But it's amazing, and I'm so pleased that we have access to the data and the research, particularly with the internet's been such a wonderful resource in that respect. So quite phenomenal. So thank you for sharing that with me. I shall look that up. Greg Wells, I shall look him up. Yeah. So 8 hours sleep is where you want to go. And the final piece here is something that I came across with Dr. Martin Seligman, who is the happiness guy. So positive psychology, he talked about, and there's one piece that he talks around from a psychology standpoint, which is this element of gratitude. And it's measurable. It's specifically measurable that if you have gratitude, or practice gratitude, then it has a measurable effect on you as a human in terms of your mental state and wellness. And he did a piece and he talks about a gratitude letter, and says if you pick somebody that must be living who has had a significant positive effect on you, but maybe you've never thanked them in a way that you'd want to, and you locate them. You write them a 300-word letter. Don't send it, but you locate them and give them a call and ask them if you can come around to their house. Then you go around to their house, and when you go in their door, you read the letter to them. And I've not done this. There is one individual, and he's a teacher. And he's a teacher I had when I was in Standard 3. And he had an incredible effect on me and I've searched all over, and I don't know if he's still living. I don't know where he is, but I would like to find him and do this, because I think it's a really powerful thing. It'll be a kind of a completing a circle kind of thing for me.
Yeah. Well, that would be amazing. So many of the viewers know, and I'm not even sure if you know, Greg, I have a Facebook page called the 2020 Daily Gratitude Practice. And so there's about 700 mainly teachers on there, and we say gratitude every single day. And it is phenomenal how many of the people on that page talk about how it's changed their lives. That just being one of the things they talk about is when they first start, we say do it for 30 days in a row if you can. That's the goal. And so 3 things a day. And one of the things they talk about is they wake up and they get to the end of the day and go, what am I grateful for today? And they have to look back on their day, and it's challenging, it's hard. And then after a while, they start going in the middle of the day, something will happen, go, oh, I'm going to write that on my gratitude today. And they start noticing gratitude today. Now, when you practice this for a wee while, we absolutely know that what happens is that these people wake up in the morning and they think, what am I going to be grateful for today? And what a huge shift that is. And even on those, when you get into a practice, and you talked about routine, when you practice things over and over and over, it becomes routine. So on those days that are hard, on those days that are difficult, it's a muscle that you've used over and over again, so you can find the gratitude. And I just posted on the page just a couple of days ago, don't think I'm all this fuzzy, warm, happy person all the time. I've had a couple of hard days, yet I can still find gratitude. And so it's a wonderful little practice. And for those of you who don't know, we have a little book here that we produced called Your Weekly Gratitude Focus, and it just has beautiful quotes. There's one of them. And on the back, it has a focus for the week. So there's 52 of them. I know many teachers are using them in their classrooms. I know many people have them in their homes, and just flip them over and just remind them to take that moment of being grateful. So, yeah, thank you for that wonderful reminder.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. That looks fantastic.
So as we begin to finish up, Greg, you talked about anxiety earlier, being worried about the future. And there's a lot of anxiety right now because we don't know what the future is going to be like. There's a lot of people talking about, maybe, could be, should, all these things. But what are some of those anti-anxiety strategies or techniques? Then we can stop worrying about the future.
I think it's a really powerful thing, and as you mentioned, right now is one of those moments, and I certainly feel it. We feel it in our family, and we're a fairly emotional family, so we're happy to let things go and as a group stand around and cry, which is a quite a lovely thing to do, actually, even in those senses. But it's an important thing, and also particularly for kids to be able to see that parents can do that, to actually be emotionally vulnerable and emotionally unafraid to actually show emotion. But in terms of anxiety, I in my many and varied careers, I worked with a organization that was doing armed hold-up training for banks and service stations. I'm a former soldier as well, in terms of some of the stuff that I have done. And what we would do is we would basically do a hold-up, and during that hold-up, we wouldn't tell people how to handle it. And then we would do training for them, and at the end of it, we'd give them a whole lot of tools, and then we'd get them to do it again, but using the tools that we had. And one of those is breathing. And often if we're in a very anxious state, we don't notice it. We don't notice it until we find that we're actually holding our breath and we're tight and our muscles are all there. So the first thing we need to do is do 2 calming breaths. And so we want to release it out. So you can take a deep breath into the diaphragm and let it all go out. Long, big breath out. Do the same thing in through the nose, breathing deep into the diaphragm and then out again. So 2 of those. And at the same time, at the end of the second breath, then you say, stay calm, and then insert your name. So we don't say, don't panic, because we will always go to the word. We will go to the last thing we heard or say. But we use our own name because it has a significant context for us. Our name is the one thing that is the most golden to our ear. as Dale Carnegie puts it. But it's really important because it goes to the core of who we are. So if we use our name plus the words stay calm, we have an opportunity to allow ourselves to relax further. We're talking about the elements of breathing. That's one of the significantly good techniques of anxiety, is to do what's called box breathing. This is where if you are in a relatively not too excited state, you can use 4-second intervals where you will breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. Yep, box breathing. And so you maintain that as a routine. And it's one of those things where you go, surely that's not going to work, right? But it's really powerful. There's a routine factor that goes into it. There's a rhythmic thing. There's a pattern thing. And the element of limiting the amount of oxygen going into the body is another big factor in terms of not allowing yourself to stress out. That comes from the world of the military. So it's an element of tactical breathing where soldiers under high stress situations will actually practice that in battle, and it reduces their anxiety and it allows them to be more effective. If you're in a higher stress situation, then you would go to a thing called tactical breathing, which is 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out. But again, maintaining rhythm going over. And it's not saying that we want our teachers to be in a battleground, because that's not what we want at all. But we all have these human responses, and the ability to use that as a technique is a really powerful one. And the other technique that I would use from an anxiety standpoint is when you're at the point of an anxiety attack. And I think there's a great deal of people who don't necessarily realize that they are in an anxious state. We tend to live in this really high level of anxiety all the time. But it's well worth being able to just stop for a moment and do the elements of 5 things. And so you start off with 5 things that you can see. So you identify that, defining 5 things in your vision that you can see. Then 4 things you can touch. So wherever you are, standing, seated, wherever it is, so find 4 things that you can touch. Then 3 things that you can hear. And it's like isolating all those little elements around. 2 things that you can smell, and then 1 thing you can taste. And the whole process of that is there's a de-escalation factor that starts at 5 and works down to 1. So it's like the process of counting down. It's the physicality of finding a moment. So you're going from moment to moment, right? So when you isolate 5 things, each one you have to put a moment of time on. And it then takes away your focus from the elements that are causing the anxiety or giving you that grief. As the countdown goes down, you find that 1 thing that you can taste, and it's you're cutting out everything else around it. So there's 2 little techniques there from an anti-anxiety standpoint, which are really simple to do, don't require any learning technique. It's just there.
And any equipment or anything else. So
correct.
That's great. So I'm fascinated that they taught that in the Army. So that is fantastic news. That's great. Look, Greg, it has been an absolute pleasure. I know this whole idea of being vulnerable and wearing your heart on the sleeve and all that, and it's about being authentic, really. The Teachers Matter book club right now, we are looking at Brene Brown's book, Rising Strong. And we're right in the chapter of that idea, the messiness, the yuckiness of the emotions and what that causes. And when we can step into that vulnerability and just sitting with those feelings and then being real with them, we have a lot of this suck it up princess or all that sort of thing. And we actually need to allow people to have those emotions, particularly for our mental health. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing with us today. And if you would like to watch the replay, you can find all the information, and I'm just going to click the little thing here, all the replays of all the other episodes on spectrumeducation.com, Spectrum TV, and there you will also find a copy of the latest Teachers Matter magazine. Now, when you go there, you can subscribe to the Spectrum TV channel and you will get a free download of this magazine. And if you haven't seen our incredible magazine, and Greg has been a contributor of it in the past, it is absolutely beautiful with just beautiful articles around personal and professional development for teachers and parents. So go to that site, spectrumeducation.com/Spectrum TV, and you can do that. So sign up and we'll let you know. You can also see the schedule of who's on next week. But I can tell you next week is Melanie Vasey. Melanie Vasey is a little pocket rocket. She is absolutely incredible, and she's going to be talking about the 5 love languages. And so if you're in a relationship, this is a absolute must to watch. I will marry anyone who's read that book. Gary Chapman's, don't tell my husband. And I keep putting it under his nose and going, will you read this, please? But if you know my love language and empty the dishwasher without me asking, I'm yours, all right? So tune in next week, same time, same place, 7 o'clock Wednesday night, and you can join Melanie and I talking about the 5 different love languages and how they relate to making sure we have fantastic relationships, not just with our significant other, but with our children, with our workmates, with everybody in the world. So thank you. Go well, keep safe, and keep learning.